I hold the phone with both hands, though it feels heavier than a brick. My fingers tremble as the screen lights up. One sentence glows back at me, sharp as a blade. Mom, please stop asking questions. You're too nosy. Stay out of it. The words blur for a moment, as if my own eyes refuse to accept them. Nosy? That's what my daughter-in-law calls me now? My chest tightens, a chill crawling up my spine. The living room is silent, except for the steady tick-tick-tick of the old clock on the wall. Even the hum of the refrigerator seems to have died away. I press the phone tighter against my palm, as though the pressure might erase the message. But it doesn't. It only sears deeper. Nosy. I whisper it aloud. The sound echoes in the empty room, foreign on my tongue. My throat burns as if I've swallowed smoke. I had only asked a simple question that morning. At breakfast. Just a casual, almost playful inquiry about the joint account they insisted I open for family convenience. I had noticed a withdrawal I couldn't remember approving. So I asked. Apparently, curiosity has a price. My pulse pounds in my ears. I lean back against the armchair, its fabric rough under my thin nightgown. The lamp in the corner casts a cold yellow light, stretching shadows across the floorboards. I suddenly feel as if those shadows are alive, crouching, waiting to consume me. I replay the moment in my mind the way my daughter-in-law, Sarah, looked at me over her coffee mug this morning. Her smile was tight, her knuckles white against the porcelain. Don't worry about it, Mom. Everything's under control. That's what she said. And now this message. My breath quickens. If everything is under control, why am I being told to stay out of it? I scroll up, reread the thread. No tenderness, no trace of gratitude for decades of sacrifice. Just irritation. Dismissal. The kind of tone you'd use with a stranger who overstayed their welcome. My thumb hovers above the keyboard. A dozen replies race through my head. Why are you hiding things? Don't forget whose money started that account. I deserve answers. But I type nothing. The silence of my own living room feels louder than any confrontation. I set the phone on the table. It lands with a dull thud, and I stare at it as though it were a loaded weapon pointed in my direction. My chest rises and falls quickly, shallow breaths scraping my throat. I close my eyes, and for a split second, I hear my late husband's voice. Ellie, you always notice the details no one else sees. He used to say it like a compliment. Now it's a crime. The clock strikes 7. The chime rattles through the room, cruel in its normalcy. I rub my temples, trying to ground myself. My curiosity, the same curiosity that once made me a good nurse, a caring mother, a present grandmother, has turned into an accusation. Why now? Why this? A sour taste creeps into my mouth. Something isn't right. I can feel it. Questions that used to bring laughter now trigger defensiveness. Answers that used to flow freely are replaced with closed doors and sharp looks. Maybe I should let it go, I tell myself. Maybe at 74, peace is better than truth. But even as I think it, my body betrays me. My hand inches toward the phone again, desperate, restless. The need to know gnaws at me like hunger. Because this isn't just about curiosity. This is about survival. I press the screen off. Stare at my reflection in the black glass. Wrinkles, tired eyes, but still a woman who has earned the right to ask. Still a woman who has given more than she ever received. The silence presses harder now, suffocating. My chest aches with the weight of unspoken suspicion. My mind races with possibilities I don't want to believe. But deep down, I know. This isn't about me being nosy. It's about them being afraid. Afraid that my questions will unearth something they've worked hard to bury. I pick up the phone again, cradle it like a confession. My lips barely move as the truth escapes in a whisper meant only for the empty room. It's not my curiosity that's the problem. It's their fear of being exposed. I close my eyes, and memories spill in, uninvited but relentless. For 30 years, I worked as a nurse. Long night shifts under fluorescent lights. The smell of antiseptic clinging to my uniform. The sound of heart monitors beeping in the background. I learned to live on little sleep, to smile even when my feet throbbed, to put my patients first and myself last. Every paycheck I earned, I folded carefully into a life I thought I was building. Not for me, but for my family. My green savings book, a plain little ledger with creased corners, was my constant companion. I carried it the way some women carry a purse. Always close. Always guarded. Every number written inside was more than money. It was proof of sacrifice. I remember the first time Mark, my only son, asked me for help. He was 25 then, full of restless ambition, eyes burning with plans. "Mom," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter, "just a small loan. 10,000. I've got this business idea. This is the one, I promise." My hands shook as I opened the savings book. 10,000 meant years of skipped vacations, years of eating leftovers instead of fresh meals, years of wearing the same winter coat until the lining tore. But I looked at him and saw not a man, but still the boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard. "I trust you, son," I whispered, sliding the check across the table. "Don't let me down." And he didn't nod immediately. He repaid part of it, smiled, said thank you. But soon came another idea. Another loan. By the time Mark was 30, I was sending him more than $2,000 each month. He insisted the company was just about to turn profitable. "Next quarter," he said. "Next client," he said. Each time, I believed him. I even sold my wedding ring, the one my late husband gave me on our first Christmas together. I stood in the pawn shop with tears stinging my eyes as the jeweler weighed it on a scale. The metal was worth less than the love I poured into it. But I told myself, this is for Mark. For his future. For our family. And when my granddaughter needed tuition money, I borrowed from friends. I endured the shame of asking. The polite smiles that barely hid their doubt. I convinced myself it was all temporary, that someday Mark's success would wipe away the debt and the humiliation. The green savings book grew thinner with each entry. I still carried it everywhere, my thumb tracing its edges whenever anxiety rose in me. There were moments, small ones, fleeting when unease gnawed at me. Once, I noticed a receipt tucked inside a folder Mark left on my dining table. It listed expenses that had nothing to do with his business. Luxury dinners, electronics, trips I had never heard about. When I asked, he laughed it off. "Mom, you're overthinking. Just trust me." I did. I swallowed my doubts like bitter medicine. I told myself a mother's role was to believe, not to question. But sometimes, late at night, I would stare at the green book in my lap and whisper to myself, maybe I'm too generous. Maybe I confuse love with sacrifice. The weight of that thought would settle in my chest, heavy as lead. But by morning, I'd push it aside. Mark needed me. His family needed me. And wasn't that what motherhood was endless giving? Years blurred together. Hospital shifts, bank visits, quiet meals alone at the kitchen table. My friends traveled, redecorated, enjoyed their retirements. I counted pennies, convinced that my joy could wait until Mark's dreams came true. Looking back now, I see the pattern, the warning signs flashing in red. The missing paperwork. The vague answers. The way he avoided my eyes when I asked simple questions. I should have pressed harder. I should have listened to the knot in my stomach. But I stayed silent. Because silence, I thought, was love. And so I kept handing over money, kept holding my tongue, kept clutching that little green savings book as if it was a shield instead of the chain it really was. "Mom," Mark once said, his voice low and urgent, "just one more loan. I swear this time it'll work." And, as always, I nodded. "I trust you, son. Don't let me down." Now, I wonder if he even heard the weight in my voice. Or if he only heard the sound of doors opening, safes unlocking, bills sliding into his hands. I sit in the silence of my living room, recalling every dollar, every promise, every time I looked away from the truth. And I know, with a sharp clarity that cuts deeper than regret, I thought silence was love. In truth, it was the rope they used to bind me. The word nosy lingered in my chest long after the screen went dark. It was like a bruise pressed from the inside. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts circling like vultures. Questions clawed at me. Why did she say that? What are they hiding? Am I really a burden? By morning, the knot in my stomach hardened into resolve. My hands shook as I brewed a cup of tea, but it wasn't nerves anymore, it was determination. I set the mug down, wiped my palms on my robe, and opened my laptop. My retirement account appeared on the screen, the familiar green logo blinking back at me. I typed in my password slowly, deliberately, as though each keystroke might change the outcome. My heart thudded so loudly I could barely hear the click of the keys. The page loaded. Rows of numbers filled the screen. At first, they blurred together just columns of deposits and withdrawals. But then my eyes froze on a pattern. 5 withdrawals, spaced weeks apart, each for several $1,000s. 5. I gripped the edge of the desk. My pulse hammered in my temples. These weren't my transactions. I never approved them. I scrolled back, double-checked, pinched my arm to make sure I wasn't imagining things. The evidence was right there, cold and merciless. The room tilted. I sat back hard in the chair, pressing both hands against my chest. My breaths came shallow, ragged. My entire body trembled as if someone had just struck me. "Enough," I whispered, the word escaping before I could stop it. I said it again, louder this time, my voice cracking. Enough. I'd given and given until there was nothing left but this fragile body and a shrinking account. And still, they wanted more. My eyes dropped to the corner of the page. Auto transfer scheduled, $2,000 next week. The very lifeline they used to drain me, hidden under the name of convenience. I hovered the mouse over the cancel transfer button. My hand slick with sweat, the cursor wobbling. I thought of Mark's face, the boy who once held my hand crossing the street, the man who now looked at me with impatience instead of love. My finger clicked. The screen flashed. Transfer canceled. I exhaled a long, shaky breath, as though I had been underwater for years and finally surfaced. My back pressed against the chair, my body heavy yet strangely lighter at the same time. A bead of sweat rolled down my temple. I wiped it away, my palm clammy. The silence in the room shifted. It wasn't suffocating anymore. It was waiting for me to claim it, to fill it with something new. Inside my head, question roared. If I keep quiet, I'll lose everything. If I speak, I may lose them. But I already lost their respect. The truth rang bitter and undeniable. Respect had been traded long ago, exchanged for convenience, for money, for silence. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Mark. "Mom, I'll come by later. We need to talk about the account." I stared at the screen. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I didn't scramble to explain, to prepare excuses, to soothe his temper. Instead, I placed the phone face down. In the corner, the green savings book lay on the shelf, its cover worn smooth from decades of handling. I pulled it into my lap, ran my fingers across its spine. For years, it had been a symbol of sacrifice. Now, for the first time, it felt like evidence of endurance. I whispered into the quiet. I am done being the quiet mother. I am done being their safety net. I pressed the book closed and set it aside. My hands, though still trembling, felt freer than they had in years. That night, I sat by the window, the streetlights flickering outside. The air was cool, drifting in through the cracked glass. I folded a blanket around my shoulders and thought about what I had done. Canceling that transfer might look small to anyone else. But to me, it was a revolution. I hadn't chosen anger. I hadn't chosen revenge. I had chosen myself. And for the first time in a long, long while, I slept with a steady heart. That night, I chose dignity over dependence. The knock came just after dusk. 3 sharp raps against the wooden door. Deliberate and impatient. I knew it was them before I even stood up. My hands tightened on the arms of my chair, steadying myself before I rose to open the door. There they were. Mark, tall and rigid, jaw clenched, eyes flickering with something colder than anger calculation. And beside him, Sarah, her lips pressed into a thin line, clutching a leather folder as though it contained the keys to the world. Neither offered a greeting. The air between us was already heavy, thick with unsaid accusations. "Can we come in?" Sarah asked, though it didn't sound like a question. I stepped aside, my body stiff. The scent of her perfume sharp, Expensive filled the narrow hallway as they brushed past me. I closed the door slowly, almost ceremoniously, as though sealing us all into a battlefield. We sat in the living room, the same room where I had once bandaged Mark's scraped knees, where birthday candles had been blown out, where laughter used to live. Tonight it was silent except for the sound of Sarah snapping open her folder. She pulled out a stack of papers, slapped them onto the coffee table with a thud that made me flinch. "Sign this power of attorney," she said flatly. "It'll make things easier." Her tone was honeyed with condescension. I looked at the papers but did not reach for them. My hands stayed folded in my lap, though I could feel the tremor in my fingers. My gaze lifted to hers, steady. "Easier for whom?" I asked quietly. "Because it surely isn't for me." The silence that followed was knife-sharp. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his stare burning into me. "Don't make this harder, Mom," he said, his voice low but trembling with impatience. "You owe us after everything." The words pierced, but something inside me rose higher than the sting. I sat straighter, letting the weight of years fall from my shoulders. "No, Mark," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I don't owe you my freedom." His head jerked back slightly, as though I had slapped him. For a second, I saw the boy he used to be shocked when I told him no candy before dinner. But the softness vanished, replaced by the man who now wanted control more than care. Sarah interjected quickly, her voice sharp. "This isn't about freedom. It's about practicality. You're 74, Eleanor. You can't keep managing everything on your own. We're trying to help." I let out a laugh, small, bitter, humorless. "Help? By draining my accounts without asking? By silencing me when I question where my money goes? That's not help. That's theft wrapped in polite words." Mark's fist tightened on his knee. "Stop exaggerating. We're family. Families share." My eyes didn't leave his. Families respect. Families tell the truth. Families don't treat their mother like a wallet with a heartbeat. He opened his mouth to reply, but I raised my hand, cutting him off. My voice trembled but carried. "All my life I gave. I gave when I didn't have. I sold my wedding ring for you, Mark. I borrowed from friends when you needed more. And now you stand here, demanding I sign away the last bit of control I have left." No. The room was so quiet, I could hear the old clock ticking in the corner. Sarah shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the silence. She pushed the papers closer to me, her manicured nail tapping the signature line. "Don't be dramatic. Just sign. Nobody has to know." I leaned forward, my hands finally moving not to the pen, but to push the papers back toward her. The sound of paper sliding against wood was louder than any shout. "I said no," I repeated. Mark's face darkened, his voice rising for the first time. "Do you want to lose us, Mom? Do you want to end up alone?" The words hung heavy. They were meant to wound, to scare me into compliance. But instead, they crystallized the truth I had been avoiding. I had already been alone for years, even with them sitting in my living room. I met his gaze and answered, softly but without hesitation. "I'd rather be alone than owned." Mark recoiled, blinking, as though he couldn't comprehend the sentence. Sarah scoffed, gathering the papers quickly, snapping the folder shut with an angry flick. "Fine," she hissed, "but don't come crying to us when you can't handle things." They stood, their movements sharp, impatient. Mark lingered a moment longer, his eyes darting over my face, searching for the weakness that used to be there. He didn't find it. Without another word, they left. The door slammed behind them, rattling the picture frames on the wall. I sat there in the trembling silence, my heart pounding, my hands damp with sweat. The papers were gone, but the line had been drawn, not in ink, in me. In that moment, I was no longer their silent mother. I was a woman drawing her line. The silence after their departure didn't last long. Within days, the whispers began. First, a neighbor mentioned they'd heard from Mark that I'd been forgetting things. Then the pastor at church asked gently if I was managing all right on my own. Their eyes carried pity I hadn't earned, pity planted by my own blood. By the end of the week, the phone calls started. Mrs. Parker, the bank manager said, his tone carefully neutral. Your son informed us you may be experiencing memory issues. For your safety, we may need to review your accounts with a family representative. The words dropped like stones in my chest. My own son had branded me incapable, had painted me as senile to justify stealing my freedom. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the green savings book spread open before me. My fingers trembled as I traced the faded ink of my own handwriting proof that I had been lucid, careful, responsible for decades. Yet their lies were already spreading faster than the truth. What if they're right? I whispered to the empty room. What if I am too old? The fear gnawed at me. I forgot where I left my glasses last week. I misplaced the keys yesterday. Were these ordinary slips of age? Or signs that I was losing myself? I pressed my palms to my eyes, the darkness behind my lids swirling. Doubt is more corrosive than any insult. It eats from the inside. The next morning, I gathered my courage and called David Miller. He was 52 now, an old friend of my late husband, and one of the few lawyers I still trusted. He met me at his office, his hair streaked with gray but his handshake firm. "Eleanor," he said gently, ushering me into a leather chair. "Tell me everything." The words tumbled out the withdrawals, the demand to sign away power of attorney, the rumors about my mind unraveling. David listened without interrupting, only nodding, his pen scratching across yellow legal paper. When I finished, I braced myself for skepticism. But instead, he looked me in the eye and said, "You're not crazy. You're cautious. And that's exactly what you should be." No. Relief flooded me so suddenly that tears blurred my vision. We began to build my defense. Piece by piece. I brought him my handwritten ledger of transactions, each line marked with dates and amounts. He requested security footage from the bank, proof of withdrawals made without me present. I asked neighbors who had seen Mark leaving with documents to give their statements. Every scrap of evidence felt like a stone stacked on a wall, brick by brick, protecting me from the storm they were trying to unleash. Still, there were nights I faltered. I'd sit in my armchair, staring at the shadows stretching across the carpet, and whisper to myself, maybe they'll win. Maybe people will believe them. After all, who would doubt a middle-aged son over an aging mother? One evening, lost in such thoughts, I heard a knock at my door. It was Mrs. Green, my neighbor of 20 years, carrying a plate of cookies. She saw the despair on my face before I could mask it. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" she asked, setting the plate down and taking my hand. "They're saying I'm losing my mind," I confessed, my voice breaking. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing anymore. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly firm for someone her age. Her eyes locked onto mine, clear and unwavering. "Eleanor, you're not crazy. You're brave. Brave enough to stand up to lies most people would crumble under." Her words pierced through the fog of doubt like sunlight through clouds. My throat tightened, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry not from weakness, but from the release of knowing at least one person truly believed me. The next day, I brought David a box filled with everything I could gather. Receipts, bank statements, my personal notes, even old holiday cards where Mark had promised to repay me soon. Each paper I laid on his desk felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. David looked at the growing pile and smiled faintly. "This is more than enough," he said. "Lies can be loud, Eleanor. But truth leaves a trail. And you've kept it all." For the first time in months, I exhaled without fear. The fight ahead was still looming. I knew they wouldn't back down easily. But I also knew something else. I was no longer standing alone, defenseless. I had proof. I had allies. I had my own voice. And I had the courage to use it. Their lies were strong, but not stronger than the truth I held in my trembling hands. It happened by accident. I was sorting through old letters one afternoon, stacking them neatly in a shoebox to keep my restless mind busy. As I shuffled through envelopes, a thin folder slipped out, one I had never seen before. It must have fallen from Mark's bag the last time he stormed out of my house. My hands froze as I picked it up. The paper felt warm from my palms, but my skin prickled with cold. Inside was a document bearing my name in bold letters. Power of attorney. At the bottom, in neat cursive, was my signature. Only it wasn't mine. The loops of the E were wrong. The tail of the Parker dragged too long. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed the paper closer, my eyes darting over every line, every forged flourish. My knees weakened. I sank into the armchair, the paper trembling in my hands. They did it, I whispered. They actually did it. I remembered Mark pushing the documents across the coffee table weeks ago, demanding I sign. I had refused, but now here it was, as if my refusal had never mattered. Anger boiled under my skin, but so did fear. If they could forge this, what else could they falsify? What chance would I have in court, an old woman against their polished lies? For a moment, doubt clawed at me again. My hands shook so violently the page nearly slipped to the floor. Then I straightened. I pressed the forged paper flat against the table, forcing my gaze to hold steady. This wasn't just betrayal. This was crime. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and dialed David. "David," I said, my voice breaking, "I found something. A forged document. My name, my signature. It isn't mine." He didn't hesitate. "Don't touch it further. Put it in an envelope. Bring it to me tomorrow. This changes everything." When I hung up, the weight in my chest shifted. The fear was still there, but now it was laced with something sharper. Resolve. I folded the document carefully, slid it into a plain envelope, and set it beside my green savings book on the shelf. My two anchors, proof of sacrifice and proof of betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered into the dark. They tried to steal my voice with ink, but that forged signature will be the very proof that damns them. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of preparation. David met me every afternoon in his office, his desk buried under piles of evidence. Together, we built my case piece by piece. He showed me how to organize receipts into neat folders, how to log every suspicious phone call, how to preserve the envelope with the forged signature so it couldn't be dismissed. At night, I practiced. Standing before the bathroom mirror, I rehearsed the words I would need to say on the witness stand. My reflection stared back at me, wrinkled skin, tired eyes, but still a woman with a steady spine. "My name is Eleanor Parker," I whispered, voice quivering. "I am 74 years old, and I know the difference between misplacing my glasses and having my life stolen." The first time I said it, my knees buckled. The second time, my throat cracked. By the fifth time, my voice rang clearer. Still, there were nights when fear crept back in. Sitting alone at the kitchen table, I'd ask myself, what if I stumble? What if the judge believes them over me? One evening, lost in those thoughts, I nearly didn't hear the knock on my door. It was Mrs. Green again, my faithful neighbor, carrying a steaming pot of tea. She poured us both a cup, then placed her hand over mine. "Eleanor," she said softly, "you don't have to do this alone. I'll testify. I've seen him leave your house with papers. I've seen the way they pressure you." Her words cracked something inside me. For weeks I had felt cornered, isolated. But now I wasn't just an old woman fighting shadows. I had witnesses, friends, proof. The next morning, I returned to David's office with renewed strength. We rehearsed the questioning, his voice sharp, mine steadier each time. He taught me how to pause before answering, how not to be rattled by their accusations. "You're stronger than you think," David said, closing the folder with a decisive snap. "They're counting on your silence. But you've already broken that. Now." That night, I slept with my hand resting on the green savings book and the envelope with the forged signature, symbols of my past and my fight for the future. The trial was coming. I could feel it pressing closer, like a storm on the horizon. But for the first time, I wasn't just afraid. I was ready. I may tremble when I speak, but every word will carry the weight of truth, and that truth will stand taller than their lies. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnish and dust. My shoes clicked against the polished floor as David guided me through the hall, his hand hovering near my elbow, though I insisted I didn't need support. Still, my knees felt unsteady, not from age but from the weight of what waited inside. We entered the courtroom. The walls were paneled with dark wood, polished to a cold sheen. Overhead, fluorescent lights blazed white and merciless, erasing every shadow. The judge's bench loomed high above us, a throne of authority carved from oak. The chairs were heavy, the kind that seemed designed to keep you pinned down. Across the aisle sat Mark and Sarah. My son kept his eyes fixed on the table, shuffling papers, pretending to read. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. Sarah, on the other hand, sat upright, lips curled into the faintest smile of triumph. The bailiff called the court to order. The gavel cracked against wood, sharp as a gunshot. My chest tightened. This was it. The opposing lawyer rose first, a man with slicked-back hair and a voice smooth as oil. "Your Honor," he began, gesturing toward me, "this case is tragic but simple. Mrs. Parker is a 74-year-old woman who, sadly, is no longer capable of managing her own finances. She forgets things. She confuses dates. My clients, her son and daughter-in-law, only sought to protect her." His words hung in the air, heavy with false concern. He turned slightly, as though to shield me from his pity. "Mrs. Parker is forgetful," he repeated. "She cannot manage finances." For a moment, my heart clenched. The murmurs in the room pressed against my skin. But then David touched my arm, a silent reminder that I had come here not to shrink, but to stand. When it was our turn, David rose. "With the court's permission," he said, "Mrs. Parker would like to respond directly." The judge nodded. My legs trembled as I stood, the weight of every eye in the room pressing against me. I clutched the edge of the table, then lifted my chin. My voice came out shaky at first, but it grew steadier with each word. "I may forget where I put my glasses," I said, the room falling silent, "but I never forget the difference between love and theft." The words rang louder than I expected. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. Mark's head snapped up, his face pale. David guided me through my testimony. I spoke of the 30 years I had worked as a nurse, of the sacrifices, the loans, the monthly transfers. I told them about the night I canceled the transfer, my hand sweating as I clicked the button. I described the forged signature, holding the document up with fingers that trembled but did not release. The opposing lawyer tried to interrupt. "Objection, Your Honor, speculation." But David cut him off. "Not speculation, evidence." "Ender." He spread the documents across the table. The bank statements, the camera footage showing withdrawals made when I was nowhere near the bank, the handwriting analysis confirming the forgery. Each piece landed like a stone in a growing wall of truth. Then came the witnesses. Mrs. Green stepped forward first, her small frame dwarfed by the witness stand. She spoke clearly, firmly, of seeing Mark leave my house with papers, of hearing raised voices, of me confiding in her about the mounting pressure. Next came the bank manager, who confirmed the suspicious activity and testified that Mark had tried to persuade them I was losing my memory. His tone made clear he no longer believed that lie. Finally, David asked me one last question. "Mrs. Parker, what do you want the court to understand today?" I turned toward the judge, toward the faces in the gallery. My voice no longer trembled. "I want the court to understand that being old does not mean being blind, that trusting your child does not mean surrendering your life, and that love cannot be measured in bank statements or power of attorney forms. I am not a burden. I am not an object to be managed. I am a woman who gave everything, and I will not be stolen from." The courtroom was silent. My words seemed to hang in the air, alive, undeniable. The opposing lawyer tried one last time, his voice sharp. "Your Honor, surely this is the emotional rambling of someone—" The judge raised a hand, silencing him. Then he spoke, his tone deliberate, final. "Having reviewed the evidence, including the forged document, the unauthorized withdrawals, and the corroborating witness testimony, the court finds the claims against Mrs. Parker to be unfounded. The petition for guardianship is hereby denied. Furthermore, this court recognizes Mrs. Parker's full authority over her assets and affairs." The gavel struck once, twice, echoing through the chamber. I closed my eyes. The sound wasn't wood on wood. To me, it was chains breaking. Across the aisle, Sarah's face crumpled in disbelief. Mark looked at me for the first time. His eyes wide, not with anger but with something like fear. For years I had been his silent provider. Now I was something else entirely. I straightened my back, inhaled deeply, and let the moment wash over me. The gavel fell, and with it, the chains I had worn for years shattered. When the courthouse doors closed behind me, the noise of the day dissolved into silence. No more gavel, no more lawyers, no more sharp words hurled across a room. Just the sound of my shoes on the pavement, the evening wind tugging at my coat. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. At home, the house greeted me with its familiar stillness. The walls seemed to sigh with relief. Or perhaps with sorrow. I set my bag on the table and sank into the armchair, my body heavy with exhaustion. For hours I sat there, unmoving, as if my bones themselves were waiting for permission to rest. The living room looked the same as always. The clock ticking, the curtains swaying gently. But tonight, it all felt different. Almost foreign. My eyes drifted to the empty chair across from me, Mark's chair. He used to sit there on Sunday afternoons, sprawling carelessly, asking what was for dinner, flipping through the newspaper. Now it stood vacant, a ghost of habit and memory. The victory in court had come at a cost. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders, though the chill in my chest had nothing to do with the air. My hands twisted together, restless. I won, I whispered to the empty room, my voice breaking. But did I lose my son forever? The question echoed back at me, unanswered. The clock struck 9. Its chime rang through the house, steady and indifferent. Once, I might have called Mark to hear his voice, to bridge the silence. Tonight, I had no one to dial. The wind slipped through the crack in the window, brushing against my skin. I shivered, pulling the blanket from the sofa over my lap. The sound of the breeze carried a loneliness I could not ignore. I thought of Sarah's face in the courtroom, tight, furious. Of Mark's eyes, wide with disbelief, refusing to meet mine. Would they ever forgive me for choosing myself? Or had the bond already snapped beyond repair? I reached for the green savings book, resting on the shelf where I always kept it. My thumb traced its worn edges, the familiar feel grounding me. For decades it had symbolized sacrifice. Now it symbolized survival. Yet even holding it, I felt no peace. Because what is survival without love? Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I had spent too many years crying quietly into pillows, hiding the sound. Tonight I allowed the sadness to sit beside me, unmasked. The house was silent but not empty. It was filled with echoes of laughter long gone, of arguments unresolved, of dreams that once tethered us together. And still, beneath the weight of sorrow, a spark of something steadier glowed. Dignity. I had fought for my freedom and won. But freedom, I was learning, comes with a crown no one tells you about, heavy, thorned, pressing against the skin. I leaned back, eyes closing, and let the quiet engulf me. Victory felt heavy, like holding a crown made of thorns. Not long after the trial, I sold the house. It wasn't easy. Every room carried echoes, Mark's footsteps on the stairs, my late husband's laughter in the kitchen, the lullabies I once hummed while rocking a feverish child to sleep. But the walls had also witnessed betrayal, manipulation, silence too heavy to bear. I signed the papers with steady hands, and when the new owners shook mine, I felt something uncoil in my chest. I moved into a modest apartment across from the public library. The building was old but warm, the kind with creaky elevators and friendly neighbors who smiled in the hallway. My new living room was small, just enough space for a sofa, a chair, and a shelf of books. The windows faced east, catching the morning Sunday. It was there, in that sunlit room, that I began again. I joined the library's book club, a circle of women and men my age who gathered every Thursday afternoon. We discussed novels and poetry, but mostly, we shared pieces of ourselves, stories of lost spouses, estranged children, unexpected joys. I listened. I laughed. Sometimes, I cried. For the first time in years, I felt seen not as a provider, not as an obligation, but as a person. I traveled too. Italy was first. I stood in Florence, gazing at Botticelli's paintings, the colors vibrant as if newly brushed. I tasted gelato on a cobblestone street and thought, this is what sweetness should feel like, earned, savored, not demanded. Then Japan, where I wandered through gardens of cherry blossoms. Petals floated down like whispers, soft against my skin. In Kyoto, I joined a tea ceremony, bowing my head as steam rose from the cup. The quiet reverence filled me with peace I had never known in my own kitchen. Each journey felt like stitching myself back together, piece by piece, continent by continent. Back home, my days grew simple but rich. I tended to a few potted plants on the balcony. I cooked for myself small meals, fragrant and comforting. On Saturdays, I volunteered at the library, reading aloud to children whose laughter reminded me that innocence still existed somewhere in the world. And every morning, without fail, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee. The sunlight spilled across the table, warming my hands as I held the mug. I lifted it slowly, savoring the weight, or rather, the lack of it. Light, almost airy, as though it floated instead of rested in my grasp. I remembered the nights I once clutched my phone, its screen glowing with cruel words, the device feeling like 1,000 pounds in my palm. Back then, curiosity was branded nosiness. Love was twisted into obligation. Silence was mistaken for respect. Now, the phone lay forgotten on the counter, silent. And in its place, a cup of coffee warm, steady, featherlight. The contrast was not lost on me. I breathed deeply, letting the sunlight wash over me. For once, I wasn't waiting for a message, an accusation, or a demand. I was simply waiting for the next page of the book on my lap, the next sip of coffee, the next gentle moment of peace. Friends sometimes asked if I regretted it all, the trial, the rupture with Mark, the loneliness that lingered like a scar. I always paused before answering, because yes, I missed him. I missed the son I once believed he was. But regret is different from grief. Regret suggests I should have chosen differently. And I know, with unshakable clarity, that I could not. To choose them would have meant erasing myself. So I chose me. I am 74 years old. I have lived long enough to know that beginnings can happen even at the edge of life. And so each morning as I lift my coffee cup into the light, I whisper a quiet truth to myself. I was not their nosy burden. I was my own beginning. I want to end this story by turning to you, the one who has walked beside me through every silence, every wound, every hard-won step toward freedom. Thank you for staying with me until now. Thank you for listening when others tried to silence me. My name is Eleanor Parker, 74 years old, once dismissed as nosy, and now the keeper of my own key. I have lived enough years to know that truth is rarely convenient. Families can twist love into debt, silence into obedience, and curiosity into shame. I was told to stay out of it, to stop asking, to accept the role of the quiet, fading mother. But I refused. And here I am. I want to ask you something, not as a stranger but as someone who has bared her heart to you. If one day your own family silenced you for asking questions, would you fade away or uncover the truth? Sit with that question. Let it linger in your chest the way it lingered in mine the night I read that cruel message. Because somewhere, someone you know, maybe even you, has faced the same wall of silence. If my story touched you, I ask you to do one simple thing. Share it. Leave a comment. Tell me what part struck you the hardest. Send it to someone who needs courage today. Follow along, because every week I will keep telling stories like mine, stories of parents, grandparents, people who have been underestimated, silenced, and yet still found the strength to rise. Maybe your words in the comments will be the very lifeline another mother needs. Maybe your share will land in the hands of someone sitting in their own dark room, clutching their own heavy phone, wondering if they are crazy for simply wanting answers. You can give them light. You can remind them they are not alone. As for me, I will keep lifting my coffee cup to the morning sun, no longer waiting for apologies or explanations that may never come. I have learned that freedom does not arrive as a gift. It is claimed, one trembling act at a time. And so, I leave you with this truth, one I carved with my own pain, one I now carry with pride. I am not their nosy shadow. I am my freedom.